Hi class. These are the key terms for evaluating qualitative research, and I recognize somewhat belatedly, because my new textbook just arrived, that the very newest textbook doesn't have this chapter. So if you've read the literature review chapter instead, that's perfectly okay. However, I do want you to know these key terms. We'll be talking about the literature review chapter in class. So in terms of gathering data, interviews are, fast, relatively speaking, compared with going out in the field and studying many, in some cases, hundreds or thousands of events. While interviews are useful, this chapter points out, other qualitative methods are also helpful. Again, it depends on the questions you have and what you want to prove or understand. If you want to study movies, that's a qualitative method. You can watch a lot of movies like that. So when we talk about our methods in qualitative research, we may want to make explicit our links to specific social science perspectives. So in the textbook, they mention naturalism, which we've already covered. That's the research model which looks at a subject's worlds on their own terms, which you'll be largely using, just getting people's stories. And constructionism, which again we already covered in the first set of key terms, where a researcher focuses on how phenomena come about through the close study of interaction in different contexts. But I also want you to know about a third social science perspective, positivism, which treats social facts as existing independently of the activities of both participants and researchers. So for this type of research, the aim is to generate data which are valid and reliable independently of the research process. Things to think about. I do want you to know the difference between emic and etic perspectives. An emic perspective, and we want to let people know in our research which perspective we're using, is a cultural specific account, an account meaningful to the actors themselves. So you're largely going to, in your interviews, get the accounts meaningful to the participants themselves. So your perspective is largely emic. But there's also the etic perspective, which you will be using as you do some analysis toward the end of the final paper, which is the perspective, the account of the observer. So you draw back and look at from your perspective so that you can compare the different accounts, emic and etic. I also, we want in the interviews for you to provide the interviewee's point of view. Again, there are places in the paper to take a step back and give us the etic perspective, give us your researcher's analysis. We do want you to, I'm going to go off on a lecture now, and I'll come back to anomalous in a minute or two. We expect you to adhere, and you should expect the research you review for your literature review to adhere to normal scientific standards. Like you should expect researchers in your readings to do that, or just let us know it's journalism. Journalism is perfectly fine. Anecdotal, terrific, which is fine. But do let us know whether you're using social science standards or it's more journalism. When you're looking over research, are there arguments for how they designed the study convincing? Does what they did make sense is the most basic question. Did they use reliable recording methods? So you'll tell us in your paper that you recorded your interviews, what the length of the interviews were, and you'll provide a master list as an appendix of the questions. Don't worry, we'll provide questions in class fairly soon. That master list of questions for your final paper goes in an appendix at the back. So you tell us what you did, if you did anything with field notes or transcripts, and you ask this about research you review. Do the researchers tell you what theories or models they're thinking or about or using? Do they talk about, and we've talked about this in class, the strengths and weaknesses of what they did? Adds credibility. Are their findings supported by data? Can their findings be generalized? So we're not expecting you to agree with everyone you interview, but we expect you to present the different positions. We expect you to provide context, and we'll talk about that later. Context includes basic things. You describe a person, which we did in class a few classes ago. You describe a place, which we'll do just before the midterm. And also providing, if this were a thesis or a dissertation, the social and historical context of your topic. It's not necessary for your final paper for this class. For your final paper for this class, we're going with D.R. Buchanan's 1992 idea that the quality of your work lies in the power of its language to display a picture of the world in which we discover something about ourselves or our common humanity. No pressure, class. Anyway, we expect you to act ethically, as you should expect the research you look at in your literature review. You should expect them to act ethically. More about that in a few classes. Oh, anomalous is here. Oh, it is a key term. I love that word. It's in the textbook, so I use it, but it's not officially a key term. Anomalous means unusual or irregular. That's the Merriam-Webster dictionary. Unusual or irregular. I just love the word anomalous, anomaly. I want you to know that. So many cultures reject the anomalous people. They push them away. But Mary Douglas in 1975 did research among the Lele tribe in Central Africa. And the Lele tribe celebrated the anomalous. And they used the example of the pangolin, which you don't need to know is an anteater, which does all kinds of weird stuff. That is a very important part of their tribal respect, is respecting something that's odd, like the pangolin. Anecdotalism or anecdotalist. So the book is sort of critical of anecdotalism. It's found where research reports appear to be telling entertaining stories, but fail to convince the reader of their scientific credibility. That's often where you start, class, with the anecdote, with the story, and that's what this paper is, where this paper starts, is with the anecdote. And I'm all for that as a pilot study component, and being anecdotalist in this case is a good thing. I want you to think about, for a thesis project, but not for this project, triangulating. So that, in triangulation, in social science terminology, is comparing different kinds of data, quantitative and qualitative methods, to see whether they support each other. So let me give you an example of triangulation. So we have anecdotes coming from World War II soldiers, the post-combat interviews. Most GIs said they never fired their weapons in battle. And that was incredible. There's the anecdote where everybody goes, what? You never fired your weapons? But then they triangulated. Whoops. Sorry, there we go. Then they triangulated, and they looked at the archival records of ammunition resupply and found out most soldiers never picked up more ammunition after their first stop at the ammunition warehouse. So the GI's anecdotes about not firing their weapons were validated by triangulation, by looking at a quantitative source. I do want you to know this very basic thing, that a theory is best understood as a set of concepts used to define and or explain some phenomena. And the criteria or reason for adopting a theory is it's useful. So you will interview 4 people, and you might come up with, inductively, a set of concepts to define or explain what you find. And that would be a theory that you come up with. I want you to know this word Pavlovian, which appears in the textbook, but is not a social science word per se. According to Merriam-Webster, it means automatic. So if you see it, Pavlovian response. But what I want you to know is it refers to some experiments with some dogs. So this guy, Ivan Petrovich Pavlov, he lived from 1849 to 1936. He was a physiologist, and he studied reflexes. And famously, he got dogs to drool after pushing a buzzer. In other words, you can set people up for an automatic response, whether or not there are dog biscuits. Well, people don't eat dog biscuits, but he set the dogs up, and they would start drooling because after the buzzer, he would give them biscuits, or something to eat. And then the buzzer itself would set them drooling. And that's an automatic, or what's called a Pavlovian response. It's a cool piece of data you probably will never be able to use. I do want you to know about the Harvard method, so described in this book. So when you're reading your literature review, you keep track of where you find something interesting with the last name of the person, the year of the piece in parentheses, and the page number. So that's page 2, right? And then you make your notes about what you want to say about that piece of literature you've read. And it's always good to keep your own notes about this, not copy and paste chunks of text, but put it in your own words so you can understand it, criticize it, interpret it. But when you do the bibliography, because you're going to be doing reading, this is how it should look. Last name of author, first initial, year, the name of the article in quotes, the name of the journal, the volume number, it's volume, the issue number, the volume number, and then the page is referred to. That's it. Volume number. Yep. And that's how you do your bibliography. We're going to get to the literature review later on in the week. Anyway, class, have a great day. Thank you.